presentation is supported by our regional water supplier, Tarrant Regional Water District. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean it to meet drinking water standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, and Mansfield, to provide water conservation programs for the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of a growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. This is why TRWD supports many programs that help save water through outdoor watering and gardening education. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you are a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler system checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home and provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There is also an event calendar where you can find important information about future classes and workshops. TRWD also partners with organizations like Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and the Tarrant County Master Gardeners to provide educational programs just like this one. Be sure to check out SaveTarrantWater.com and sign up for their free services.
I'm going to talk about tree care tonight, and I'm going to talk about basically, picking a tree, planting a tree, and then taking care of that tree after you get it planted and it gets mature. So the one thing I'm not going to talk about tonight is any disease of trees. That is a whole webinar in its own, and I will mention oak wilt, but other than that, we're not going to talk about any pathogens or pests on trees. So it's really going to be kind of basic, but I'm hoping that you can take away some information tonight. I'm going to give you some resources where you can really take a deep dive into this if you so choose. I need to give a content credit to Dr. Kevin Dillard. He was the Director of Landscape Management at SMU, and Hannah Johnson, who is kind of over our tree farm here in the city of Fort Worth, which we're really, really fortunate to have the tree farm. And if you've never visited, you should. It's over by Off-Campus Drive in 820. And those trees are grown to help our parks, and also you can get trees for your neighborhood. So Hannah is a great resource that I took some content from her too. So also I did prepare this presentation while I was on vacation, so I'm just going to apologize ahead of time. So it's a little interesting in some portions. Okay. Oh dear. Let's see if I can move my slides here. There we go. Okay. Agenda today, we're going to talk about picking and planting. And by the way, part of my vacation was in Nashville. So, I think that's where the picking came from. And we're going to talk about watering, we're going to talk about mulching, and last of all, we're going to talk about pruning. So let's get going here. Okay, we're going to pick and we're going to plant. So there's several things we need to be concerned about when we're picking. We need to talk about the site. We're going to talk about, what form these trees come in, type of tree. And then we're going to talk about planting as far as the depth, what kind of soil amendments are not in this case. And then orientation just means, well, we'll talk about it when I kind of get to that part. It is important, but not horribly important. Okay, there's several different ways you can get trees. One is bare root. I've got a picture there of a bare root tree. Most of the time, these are fruit trees, will come bare rooted. It's your shortest window for planting. Obviously, I think that's pretty apparent because you've got those bare roots and they need to need to get them in the ground as soon as possible. The roots are visible, so it's very easy to assess the health of the roots and see if there's any girdling roots or circling roots, which we're going to talk about in depth. If you look at the picture there in the bottom right, it kind of gives you an idea of how you plant a bare root tree. So you're going to dig your hole, and then you're going to take part of that fill that you pulled out of the hole, you're going to make a mound, and then you're going to use that mound to support your roots on that bare root tree. And then you would fill the hole just like you normally would, and we're going to go through that as well. But so bare root is an option for your trees. There's also ball and burlap. This is common with very large trees. You can get really big trees this way. Less water requirements because the root ball is intact with the soil around it. It is prone to transplant shock because if you think about it, these trees are actually grown in the ground, and then they have a large mechanism or machinery that actually pulls that tree. It goes down like kind of like forceps and grabs that tree out of the ground, and then they wrap it in the burlap and ball it up and then transport it to the location. So obviously there's going to be some roots that are going to be cut during this process. And so we do have to deal with transplant shock on a ball and burlap tree. It does require special equipment. And the root condition is a mystery on a ball and burlap. Unless you pull the soil away from the roots, you're really not going to know what you got there. So that's a downside on the ball and burlap. But by far, the most common way that we're going to buy a tree, and for most of us who are, just homeowners, we're going to get it in a container. It's available in many sizes. You can plant it year round. However, the best time to plant a tree is in the fall. Usually like that first or second week in October is a really good time because it gives that tree time to get established before we hit the really hot summertime, which is really, really stressful for our trees. So the longer they have to get ready for that, the better. Typically, there's not as much transplant shock with a container grown tree, and the system or the root system can be inspected. Matter of fact, when you're at the nursery, sometimes you will be able to pull that tree out and look at it before you purchase it, just to get an idea of what that root ball looks like and how root bound it is in the container. Problem with containers is root defects are very common. So if you look at the pictures here, the one at the bottom, you can see the roots are really circled around the root ball. That is because they've grown out, they've hit the container, they have no place to go, and they just start circling around. So this is a problem with container grown trees. Hopefully, you're going to buy your tree from a really reputable nursery where they have bumped up that tree appropriately into bigger containers so that you don't have as much root circling and root bound root ball. Okay, so as far as picking a tree and as far as like site evaluation, I want to share this website with you, and it's texastreeplanting.tamu.edu. And this is a screenshot of that website. So you can see they've got a tree selector there. They've got tree planting and care, which is a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight. But they also have a landscape tab. They have planning the space for your tree, how to pick a tree at the nursery, how to prune your tree, which we're going to talk about tonight. But this is a very, very comprehensive website for helping you with your trees. Nancy will be sending you a link to this presentation. She's also going to send you a handout that I did for recommended trees for Northwest Texas. And it's going to have the height, it's going to have the grow rate, it's going to have comments about it, it's going to have drought tolerance, all of that information. And it's also on the backside is going to have tree selection considerations, which that is just kind of giving you a step-by-step guide of what to look for when you go to the nursery and look for a tree. so that you will make a good choice from the get-go, which will make your life easier in the long run and hopefully get a nice, mature, sturdy tree. Okay, let's start with planting. I'm gonna get a drink. All right. Okay. First of all, you wanted to dig your hole 2 to 5 times the width of the root ball. I mean, 2 is minimum, 5 is fantastic. If you can get, 5 times the width of that root ball, it's going to give you just better results. But you're only going to plant the hole as deep as the top of the root flare. So let's talk about the root flare and what that is. So if you look at the picture at the bottom left, you will see they've dug down. You can actually see where the soil was on the trunk of this little tree. And you'll see they've dug down to show the root flare. So it's kind of that first root that comes out from the trunk in the soil, and you may have to dig down a couple of inches to find it. But that's extremely important because you want the very top of that root flare to be at the top of your soil when you plant your tree. One of the biggest issues that we have is people planting their trees too deep. So you got to find that root flare, and then you can measure. And you can see the second picture there, the one in the middle. They're kind of showing a technique that you can use to measure the depth of your hole so that you get it where you want it to be. You want to keep the soil that you bring out of the hole right near the edge of your hole because you're going to need it. Because actually, this is one time when we say, do not amend your soil. You want to use your native soil when you're planting trees. I know a lot of times you've probably been to some of our Master Gardener talks, and we talk about amend the soil, amend the soil. Well, this time you're not going to. And there's a good reason for this, because if you think about it, most of us are probably have clay soils here in Tarrant County. And so if you were to amend the hole and put a bunch of amendments in there, the roots are going to love it and they're going to spread out. And as soon as they get to the edge of that amended soil, they run into our clay soils, and it's like a bathtub. It's like you've planted them in a bathtub. And I heard one of the professors call it the bathtub of death. So you want to use native soil. You also might glaze the walls of the hole if you are in deep clay. And I don't know if when you've dug a hole in clay, if you've ever noticed, like the sides of the hole look really shiny and almost like plaster. Well, that's just our clay soil. So if you take your soil knife or your shovel and just kind of etch around the hole, just etch that wall so that it gives those roots a place to go. So that, just opens them up a little bit so they can go into those cracks. So, all right. So got to find the root flare. And so once you have it in the hole and you start backfilling, you want to actually use a little bit of water, just a slow running hose, because you really don't want to have any air pockets as you're backfilling this soil into around the root ball. So you want backfill it, water, tamp it down, more soil, and keep doing that until you get it up to where you want it to be, where you can see the root flare. Okay, let's talk about these roots. Container grown trees can be prone to circling roots. One of the best ways to help this problem is to shave the roots. You're actually going to shave the root ball when you pull it out of that container. Another way you can do it is by cutting it. So cutting those roots so that they stop that circling motion around the root ball, because unfortunately, once those roots start growing in that circular fashion, they're going to keep growing that way. So shaving is really the most effective, but you can also do cutting, and you can, if it's a large tree, you might be able to actually put it in the hole and do it with your spade and just cut those roots. I know that's a scary thought, but this really, really is necessary. If you plant this tree, the one at the top there, just like that, this tree is not going to thrive. It is not going to do well. Those roots are going to get bigger and bigger, and eventually they will choke out this tree within probably 2 to 3 years. Um, I work the help desk some, and I'll have people call and they'll say, you know, I planted these 3 trees in a row or shrubs, and one of them is dying and all the rest look great. What, what's going on here? Obviously, I can't see it, but when you have one that's dying and the rest are doing okay, I tend to think it probably was poor planting, and those roots did not get pulled out adequately so that they could grow, and they have girdled the trunk, and therefore the shrub or the tree is not thriving. So circling roots become girdlers. And I don't know if girdlers is a word, but it is a word tonight. So once again, you're going to shave or cut those roots before you plant it. However, you may end up having a girdling root. I've got a picture of one here on the right. And you want to cut these, you want to be paying attention, and you want to cut these as soon as you see them when they're still small. Because when they're small, you're not going to hurt the tree at all to cut these. This particular tree is a desert willow. And so if you can imagine, it's a multi-trunk tree, but you can imagine as this tree gets bigger, this root that's girdling the one trunk is going to get bigger. And eventually it will just choke it out altogether, and this entire branch will die. So what you want to do is you want to try to cut it as close to the trunk as you can. This one was a little bit tough. What I ended up doing was using a chisel and a hammer, and very carefully I chiseled out the root without damaging the other trunk. So I just chiseled it out and chiseled it on both sides and just pulled it off. Any girdling root over 4 inches in diameter probably needs an arborist's attention. Unfortunately, when these girdling roots get that big, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So you really want to try to catch these before they get big, because once they're big, it's very difficult to remove them without doing some pretty severe damage. Okay, tree roots. Which way do they grow? A or B? And unfortunately, I can't see you guys, but the answer is A. They do grow out laterally. They go way past the drip line of the tree. The drip line is basically the edges of the leaves, the canopy of the tree. And they go way out. So when you look at this picture, I think this begs the idea of, oh my goodness, what do the roots look like of trees that are like planted between the street and the sidewalk, or maybe up too close to your house? I know we've all seen large trees that were planted really close to people's houses. It just really makes you think what those roots, where they go and what they might look like. Okay, so now that we know about roots, what about watering? So let's talk about what we have to do. We got the tree in the ground. We didn't plant it too deep, and now what do we do? How much water? Okay, it is really difficult for someone to tell you exactly how much water you need to put on your tree, because we do have different soils. So the 3 we have here is the fine sand, the silt loam, and the loamy clay, which most of us here probably have one of either the silt loam or the loamy clay. So this slide is just kind of showing you the percolation time depending on your soil. And I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't real good with the centimeter thing. So I had to look up what 120 centimeters, and that's about 4 feet. So that's the percolation time. So you can see 10 minutes, but look over here on the clay, 6 hours. And this is for like a drip system. Um, so obviously, if you're in sandy soil, you're going to you don't have to water very long, but you've got to water more often because the water just flows right on through. Conversely, if you're on the clay soils, you don't have to water, you water much longer, but you don't have to water as often because it stays damp much longer and it holds the water a lot longer. Um, Nothing wrong with clay soils. They're just dense and but they are very fertile. So that is one advantage to having your clay. And I got another one here that I don't know, it may be a little bit easier for some people who are not real um, picture oriented. Maybe you're more, statistics oriented. So this kind of gives you an idea like, okay, if you say you need to put down, 2 inches of water twice a week. Okay. So now you have kind of an idea, if you look at your clay soils, how long you're going to have to run your soaker hose. So for an hour, you might get almost half an inch of if you have really clay soil. So that's just a way to determine how much water you need to put on this tree. The tree needs to be damp. It doesn't need, you don't want it like swimming, but it does need to kind of be damp. And one way that I use to help determine that is I have a dowel that's about, oh, I don't know, an inch around or so, half inch around. And it's about 18 inches long or so. And I poke that down near the root near the root ball and I pull it back up. If it is completely dry, 12 inches down, your tree needs water. So you can use that to push it in there and just see how damp your soil is down 6 to 12 inches deep. And this probably needs to happen for 2 summers until that tree is well established. Once it's established after about 2 summers, now let me do one caveat here. There are a few of our trees that are very desert-like. I mentioned the desert willow a minute ago. Those trees do not require the same amount of water as, say, a live oak or a pecan or even a redbud. So those trees are going to require more water. The desert willow doesn't need to stay damp all the time. It needs to dry out pretty well between waterings, but it is an outlier. Most of our trees need to be on the damp side for about a year. After the 2 years, 2 summers, then the only time you really need to put extra water on a tree, like with a soaker hose, is days like today. If we go through a period where we are over 100 degrees for couple of weeks and we have no rain for 4 weeks, you might consider putting some supplemental water, particularly on a younger tree. Now, if you've got an oak that's 50 years old, that tree will not need any supplemental water, even in the summer. It has got a great root system and it's used to our weather here in Texas. Ways you can water, you can do the soaker hose. They also have these watering bags. When you are backfilling your tree for the first time with your soil, you do want to make sure that you're adding water as you go. And if big bubbles are coming up, that means you've got air pockets in there, and you do not want air pockets. You want to tamp that soil down to get rid of any voids that you have in there. But they have these great bags. They have spikes that not only can you water your tree, you actually, these spikes, you hook your hose and you do a slow infusion with the hose into these spikes. And you can also put fertilizer in there as well. So there's lots of different products to help you to keep these trees alive. I think I've got two in my neighborhood on the street right behind me, and I saw some today in another neighborhood where obviously these people had just planted these trees in the spring and they didn't water them, and they're dead. And this is a huge investment. So you want to don't just plant it and walk away. You've got to be diligent about keeping these trees watered because you're going to spend, $500 to $1,000 on these trees, and you want to be successful. So be diligent about your watering. All right. Should you mulch your trees? Nature mulches her trees with leaves in the forest. So trees are kind of used to having mulch. However, the root flare does need air. So the root flare is the part of the tree that is between the trunk and the starting of the root system. It's above ground. This is a great example of the root flare. It's super easy to see. It's not always this easy to see on some varieties of trees, but it does need air. So you don't want to cover up the root flare. So when you do mulch, you see on this one, you can see the flare. So whoever did this mulching did a great job. And then you have this, and I'm sure we all have seen this many, many times. There is no root flare here. They've piled up the mulch really high on the trunk. And what this does is it basically keeps the tree from getting air, but it also is it it's a it causes fungus. It is smothering basically the root system of this tree. And eventually you're going to have root failure. And you can see this poor tree fell and it has absolutely no roots. It has nothing to anchor it because they have just completely rotted. One, here's another one. And you can actually see the ring here where the mulch was way too high on the trunk of the tree. So be careful with your mulching. Recommend mulching. It does help keep things moist, but you've got to make sure you don't over mulch. All right, let's talk about some pruning. Is pruning really necessary? I mean, after all, maybe these trees just need to be the way God made them and just let them grow willy-nilly. Well, we say, yes, you really do need to prune. You want good structure. You want it to look nice. Sometimes you need to raise the canopy or control the growth because of where the tree is located on your property. Some trees need thinning, particularly trees that might be prone to fungus. To allow airflow in that tree, maybe you want the tree to be thin so you get a little more sunlight on other plants. We always have hazards. We have windstorms, dead, broken, rubbing limbs all need to be pruned. But no pruning on newly planted trees. They're already in shock. You don't want to make it worse. So you want to wait probably at least a year before you do any pruning on newly planted trees. Give them a time to kind of get used to where they are. So what I'm going to do is I want to give kind of a step-by-step guide because if you're like me, I was really scared. I was scared to do any major pruning, thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do something wrong. And once you cut it off, you can't put it back on. And I really was just super worried about pruning. And I have come to realize that pruning is actually good for the tree. And but I want to give you kind of a checklist so that you know where to start, because you look at a tree and you just get kind of like, well, I don't know what to do. So I want to try to make this as basic and easy as I can. Okay, proportion. So when you look at the tree, you want 60% canopy, that's the leafy part, and 40% trunk, right? So you want more leaves than trunk. Don't remove over 25% of the canopy at any one time. You want to trim in the winter. That's the best time. If you can't do it in the middle of the winter, we're talking January, February, then the hottest part of the summer, which would be like right now. Oaks. This is where oak wilt comes in, and that is with our live oaks and our red oaks. You only trim oaks in January and February or July, August. The oak wilt beetle, the little beetle that carries the oak wilt, is active between March and the end of June. So you don't want to do any trimming on oaks at that time. If you have to trim an oak, like if we have a windstorm and you have broken branches, you want to paint the wound as soon as possible. And you can use any kind of paint. You can use spray paint out of your garage. Um, Latex, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have like pruning paint. That's not necessary. Just make sure you do paint those oaks. I would say paint the oaks year round, just to be safe. Other trees do not need pruning paint at all. So only the oaks. Um, and the other thing that I've seen on occasion is if you have a void in a tree, maybe where two branches come together and you've got a void in there and you've got some moss or things like that growing. I've seen people actually put concrete in the void. Don't do that either. That is just that is a big no-no. So only paint with the oaks and nothing else. So paint those wounds on oaks. And always sanitize your equipment before and after pruning, not only for oak wilt, but for a variety of pathogens and pests can be spread with your equipment. So make sure that you sanitize those. You can just use Clorox wipes. They work great. And when you prune, it's going to yield a response from the tree or the shrub. So that is the reason we say don't prune in the fall because you're going to have a response from that tree and then it's going to get cold. And it's, possibly going to burn or freezer burn that new growth that the tree's going to put out in response to the pruning. So yields a response. So I don't have a good slide for this, but if you think about a tree, it grows from the ends, right? So the ends of the branches, that's where the growth is coming from. And you have a little bud at the end of that branch, and it controls the growth of that branch. So if you cut that bud, so you're trimming the tree and you cut at the buds, that's where you're going to get like lateral branching right there. So you want to be aware of where you cut the branch and look at the buds. Look at the way they're what direction they're pointing. If the bud is pointing down, you probably don't want to cut to that bud because you don't want your branches to go down. You want them to go, up and out. All right, good structure. So good structure starts at the nursery when you pick your tree. And you want to pick one that has a really good developed leader. And this is not for a multi-trunk tree. This is just for a regular tree, whatever that means. So you want to look for a tree that has a big, strong leader right in the middle, just like our picture here on the right. You want it to have nice looking bark. You'd like the branches to be evenly distributed around the trunk. And you want a good taper on your trunk. So little at the top, bigger at the bottom. The low branches, let's talk about this for a minute. It's really better when you pick your tree at the nursery if you pick one that's got some what we call trashy trunk. And that is a tree that's got some little branches coming almost all the way down to the ground, maybe a foot or so above, but you've got branches down there. It's not been pruned up high. And those low branches, they're going to be temporary. You're eventually going to cut them off, but it does help develop the taper of the trunk and it prevents sun damage. When you plant it in your yard, you're not sure which side of that tree has been facing the sun. So having those branches down there do help keep it from getting sun scald. All right, let's talk about branch angle. The good branch angle at the top is 45 degrees or greater. That's strong, and it's your perfect type branch. If you look on the one below, that kind of reminds me of our Bradford pears. Not a great tree, and that is a bad branch angle. That narrow branching, it's going to hold water, and it is weakly attached. Those are the kind of branches that we lose in windstorms. Okay, what to prune? All right, this is just cleaning. We're just going to talk about, I just generally want to clean my tree up. I'm not trying to do anything major. I just want to clean it up. So number one, dead, broken, or damaged. Those need to go. Those are the first ones. Anything that's creating a hazard or creating damage, like limbs that are brushing on your roof, those need to be trimmed up. You want them off your roof. Anything that is in this picture there on the bottom left, you can see this is a branch that's completely broken off and it's just hanging up there waiting to fall on somebody. Those need to be taken care of. Competing, crossing, or rubbing branches. So anytime you have rubbing branches, you get damage to the bark. Anytime you have damage to the bark, you are inviting pests and pathogens to just, come on in, just move in. So you want to try to keep your bark healthy. So anything that's rubbing on the bark is going to damage it. So other branches, the fence, anything like that. Sometimes you might think, well, my tree's a little bit above the fence, but when the wind blows, it may rub on the fence. So just be aware, anything that damages your bark is going to be a problem. And then basil sprouts or crepe myrtles are notorious for their sprouts. You want to go ahead and trim all of those back as well. And then finally, you need proper clearance if you have a tree that is near the street or near a corner. And here in the city of Fort Worth, it is 14 feet. So they require 14 feet clearance on your street trees. So that's cleaning, okay? Now, there's other types of pruning that you might want to do depending on the circumstances. So we're going to kind of go through each one of these quickly. So we got the tree on the left is before pruning. So you might want to thin your tree. Maybe you've got some fungus. Maybe you've got grass growing and you want to thin it a little bit to create some sun. So here's an example of what you would cut if you were thinning. The next one would be raising. So if you need to get your 14-foot clearance, you've got a stop sign that needs to be visible, you need to raise it. Reduction. Okay, reduction is like reduction in size. So you've got a tree that for some reason you want it to be a little bit smaller. Notice we didn't top the tree. You never, never, never top a tree. If you're going to reduce it, you reduce it all the way around the canopy. You don't just chop off the top of it. That is no. And then cleaning, which is what we talked about in the previous slide, is just a little bit of cleaning. Now, I would say on this one, if you see that branch that kind of goes, and let me see if I can use my pointer here. I don't know if you can see it. This branch right here, this is probably rubbing. And this branch is growing in a direction that you really don't want it. So I probably would have trimmed this one as well. And you might have to trim a little bit on this side just to make it look symmetrical. All right, so we need a little bit of anatomy here. So bark branch ridge in the branch collar. So let me see if my pointer will work again. Okay, you see this little seam? It looks like a seam in the tree. There's one here, and then this one is here. It's a little different depending on the species of tree, but that is the ridge. And then on the outside of the ridge, this bark that's kind of looks different, this little swelling, that is the collar. It is very important that you do not cut into the collar or the ridge when you are trimming your branches off of the trunk. This area in here has a lot of proteins and enzymes and what have you that helps the tree heal. So if you cut it off, the tree is going to take much, much longer to heal that wound. So keep that in mind when you go to cut. Also, if there's a large branch that needs to be cut, particularly if you've had some kind of storm damage, the best way and the safest way to do that is the 3-cut method. So the first cut is going to be a third to a half, okay, right here. You're going to go halfway, and then you're going to stop. And then cut number 2 is further out, and you're going to cut all the way through. And this is going to get rid of all this weight. So now all you're left with is just kind of a stump. Then in number 3, you come outside of the ridge and the collar, and you cut your final cut. So what this does is it keeps the weight of that branch from just ripping the bark all the way down the trunk, which is a really bad wound and very difficult for the tree to recover. So you want to try to, at all possible, keep that bark damage to a minimum. We call them tear downs, and it's not pretty. Okay, what to avoid? We already talked about mulch. Don't put mulch around the trunk. You need to be able to see the flare. Planting too deep. Don't plant too deep. See, you cannot see that root flare here. It's too deep. Stub cuts. Leaving a big long stub like this is difficult for the tree to take care of that. And flush cuts, where you cut into that branch collar, is also difficult for the tree to heal. Sometimes, if you think about, like with this one, exactly where would I cut, and what angle would I want to make that cut? A good rule of thumb is think about if you put a ring. If you put a ring on that stub, and where that ring would be and the angle that it would be, this is kind of hard to describe. Hopefully you're getting it. That's the angle that you want to cut your stub. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, ask me a question. I'll see if I can do a better job. Once again, also what not to avoid is you don't want to top a tree. So the tree on the right is not reduction pruning. That is called crepe murder. And that we do not want that. If you're having to do that to your crepe myrtle, then your tree is probably in the wrong place. It's really important when you go to pick your tree that you know how big this tree is going to get, so that you will put it in a place where it can grow to its splendor, and you don't have to do a lot of pruning. All you're going to be doing is just kind of cleaning pruning, which is the easy one. If you do have a tree like this, maybe you've moved into a house and they've done this to their crepe myrtles for years, it can be fixed. One way to do it is to go ahead and cut it at the ground. Just completely cut it as flush to the ground as you can. And of course, in crepe myrtle style, the suckers are going to come up. So when they come up, you need to pick like 3 or 4. Is basically you're taking off all of the kind of under branches of the tree. 2 problems with this. One, it makes your tree structurally unsound. When we have high winds, the tree, this is really, really prone to breakage. The other problem is, like a day like today, when it was super, super hot, the leaves basically stop photosynthesis. Because what happens is, in the anatomy of a leaf, we have these little pores. They're like pores on the leaf, and they have to open in order for the leaf to photosynthesize. So when those pores are open, kind of like our pores, it's going to lose moisture. moisture is going to come out of the tree. Well, when it's super hot, the tree wants to protect itself and keep as much moisture in as possible. So it's going to close those pores. And therefore, there's no photosynthesis taking place. So the understory leaves, in the lower branches, they're pulling the weight of the photosynthesis when it is a really, really hot day. So two different things: structurally unsound, and you're really hurting it as far as the tree being able to take in nutrients from the sun. So don't do it. That's the bottom line. Um, and I think that is about all I've got for you guys. Let me see.
Had a question earlier
Mhm.
about the edge procedure. Is that glazing?
Yes. I think we call it glazing because it just looks it's really smooth and it looks kind of like plaster when you dig that hole in clay soil. And you just want to take like a soil knife and score it so that it's not so shiny and hard for those roots to penetrate. So just think about you want those roots to penetrate into your native soil, so you're going to give it some space to do that.
Okay. And Anne has a question. Is there any national effort to spread the word to take action to reduce the vulnerability of trees that put people and property in harm's way due to the lack of knowledge and best practices?
That is a great question. I know in the city of Fort Worth, uh, which is all I know is city, but they have a phone number. And there's also, you can go on the Fort Worth website and you can report trees that are a hazard.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. And the people that have raised their hands, if you'll ask or indicate in the Q&A or even in the chat, you know, unless you guys can see who raised their hands just recently. So, in the meantime, Jane wants to know, I just want to say how clear and concise your presentation's been, or comment. Sometimes in training, there's almost too much information and
Oh,
details, so the main points become blurred. So great job, Donna.
oh,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. And
Okay, can you
Paula,
see my last slide?
yes, we can.
Okay. Um, so I put in there the Texas Tree Planting .tmau. I also put in Aggie Horticulture, which is a great site for all things turf, trees, perennials, whatever. Also, the Master Gardener Help Desk phone number and our email. If you have something that you would like to ask a master gardener about, you can call or you can send a picture. If it's something that you want us to see, send a picture to that email and write, what your problem is. And Master Gardener will get back with you. And let's talk about arborist real quick. Treesaregood.org is a great place to find a certified arborist that you put in your zip code and it'll find arborists that are in your immediate area. So if you need an arborist, and I would encourage you, don't do your own tree trimming if you have very large oaks like we do here in Ridgely Country Club Estates. You need to hire an arborist to do it.
Okay. We have a few more questions coming in.
Okay.
Paula's asking trimming live oaks suggested in January, February, July, and August? Question mark.
Correct.
How about post oaks?
Post oaks are not, I think they still could get oak wilt, but they are not as susceptible at all. So post oaks are a little bit different. You can push those, into March, but you still want to trim your trees before they start leafing out. It's much better to do it when they're dormant. And if you
Okay.
think about it, the middle of the summer, our trees are somewhat dormant at that time too. They're not really actively growing just because of our, adverse weather. It's just so hot.
Okay. And a question very similar to that is Jane wants to know what kind of license should you look for with the arborist to have?
It's called ISA certified. And every arborist that is on that treesaregood.org is ISA certified.
Mhm. Sounds good.
And don't ask me what ISA stands for. Dick, do you know?
International Society of Arborists, maybe?
What's that?
International Society. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know.
yeah. Okay, and then somebody at Browning 4043 says, how do you plant a bald burlap tree?
Oh, a ball and burlap?
Yeah,
Okay. So it's actually you do not have to remove the burlap. That is not required. You want to remove the strings or anything that's holding the burlap around the roots, but you don't have to completely take the burlap off. Now, that depends on how big your tree is. If it's a smaller tree, you can go ahead and take the burlap off, but some ball and burlap trees are very large and it's very difficult to remove it. And you can just plant the tree with the burlap.
okay. And the last one in the Q&A at the moment is by Sandy. And her comment is, this was presented so concisely, just enough, and good review. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hey, I have to have things explained to me like I'm a second grader, okay? So that's kind of the way I operate.
Okay, and Nancy Curl found out ISA is, I got 2 out of 3, but it's International Society of
Arborist, okay.
Arboriculture.
Oh, arboriculture. Okay. All right.
Arboriculture. Yeah. So they plant a tree in a grow bag and then set it in a hole in the ground when it's too big for the grow bag and it's time to plant.
You know what? I am not well versed on grow bags, so I am not sure I can answer that question
Okay.
intelligently.
Yeah.
I have never used them.
Hannah Johnson, we had that question come up at one of the events she was teaching, and she said, it depends. It always depends. But
That's
if
right. Yeah.
your grow bag is made out of a biodegradable material,
Yeah.
those kind of things, you can kind of cut it up as much as you can. But if you've got a big old huge tree, like one of these 40-gallon, bigger than 40 gallons,
Yeah.
they're too big for most of us to pick up. So she said, just cut it some holes, cut strips, cut the bottom if you can, and just roll it in there.
Roll it
And
in.
that'll
Yeah.
push away. Yeah. Other than that, Q&A popped up some thank yous by Ann. Joanne said fantastic.
Oh, thank you. You
Way to
guys
go.
are very nice. Thank you very much. I enjoyed doing this, and like I said, I just want to see people be successful and as they can. And gardening is hard. It's hard here in Texas, and so I think as many tips as you can have to help you be successful, the better it's going to be. So.
Sounds good.
And I'll tell you, if you've never really heard of girdling roots, you're going to see them everywhere now. It's like once you're aware of it, you're going to see them everywhere.
Mhm.
Okay. Well,
Well, then I guess we're done.
I
The
guess we
link
are
for the
done.
feedback is in the chat box.
Okay.
It will also be included in the follow-up email.
And the follow-up
Yeah, the
email. Okay.
evaluation form is in the chat, and of course, Nancy will send you a copy of it also.
Yes, please do. We would really like to know like what topics you would like to hear about. So if you've got any feedback of things you want to hear, any feedback from me, I would love to hear it. And we would really appreciate filling out the evaluation. And Nancy will also send you the recommended trees document that I'm going to send to you. So you got recommended trees and how to select a tree at the nursery so that you get a good start.
Well, and I
Yeah.
want to throw in a plug if they want a really young tree that's free, if they will look for events during Texas Arbor Day, which is the
That's right.
first Friday in November. So Master Gardeners will actually have theirs at the demo garden on that Saturday, that first Saturday in, not the first Saturday, let me check the calendar real quick.
No,
I'm
it's-
sorry. I should have known that before I started. It'll be November 9th will be
Ninth?
the Arbor
Okay.
Day event at the demo garden, and they'll be giving away free trees. They're seedlings, but they're free.
Well, and I've had people come back like a year or two later and say that their tree is still doing great. The one thing about planting a seedling, a small tree, is it does grow a lot faster than planting a more mature tree, or one that may be 4 or 5 years old. So you'd be surprised how quickly those little ones will grow. It's kind of like babies, same thing.
There you go. All right, great job, Donna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and everybody have a nice evening, and I will see you in the garden.